Let's see. I just got like a recording consent. I'm like, okay, that's never happened before. All right, so we are, I know we spoke a little bit last week about the people taking a day off, and Pharaoh was like, no, if you have time off, then you just need to work harder. So let's see. Is that Christy? Who's joining us? I feel like maybe that's Christy. I don't know. I can't tell. I can only see the top of her head. There she is. How you feeling? I'll ask her again when she's actually connected. Let's see. So do you remember the exact like place that we are at? Oh, okay. So I remember that the Pharaoh made them go back to work, and that he was basically giving them the scraps. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think we got down to chapter 6 for sure.
Okay.
And
well, let's just go to 6, and then that's with that's a good starting point. All right. The Lord said to Moses, now thou shalt see what I will do to Pharaoh. And can you only imagine what, when God says, watch this. For with a strong hand shall he let them go, and with a strong hand shall he drive them out of his land. And God spake unto Moses and said unto him, I am the Lord. And he appeared unto Abraham, Isaac, Jacob by the name of God Almighty, but by his name Jehovah was not known to them. So I remember talking about this, Dad. We talked about the new name, like because the others had not heard the name Jehovah before. But to Moses, that he was like, I'm Jehovah, so all right, because I remember that. So I'm just scrolling down a little bit because this is just going back over everything. It says, I'll bring you unto the land concerning the which I did swear to give you to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. So he's basically just reiterating the promise. And Moses said before the Lord, behold, I am of uncircumcised lips, and how shall Pharaoh hearken unto me? Again, he's kind of doubting it. And the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall be thy prophet. And thou shalt speak all that I command, and Aaron thy brother shall speak unto Pharaoh, that he send the children Israel out of his lands. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. But Pharaoh shall not hearken unto me, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt and bring forth mine armies. So I always thought it was strange. And I never really noticed until I got older and I read the story with more detail that God purposely hardened Pharaoh's heart. He could have at the very beginning said, let my people go, and Pharaoh could have been like, all right. But instead, he wanted to prove his power, I guess. You know what I mean? He wanted to show what could really be done. I'm assuming, because he kept hardening his heart. What do you think about that? Do you think that's God, showing his power? Or did you have another opinion on that?
I think that you're right. I it's hard to say why.
Right. Why would God do something?
God would do that. But if you think about it from the point of view of the Israelites and the point of view of me, if God delivers me from something very simply and easily, I don't see it as big a deal.
Right.
As if I've had to struggle some in prayer and I've had to really go through some stuff in order to get the deal. I mean, it's not that I'm earning it. It's not that but it's just it's my human nature to not rank high, I mean, grace is grace no matter what it is. It's great.
Yeah.
But if it's easy to do, we don't see it as near as much of grace as if it was hard to do.
Yeah.
For God, it's not hard at all.
Right. Right.
But I think you're right. I think I think he's trying to demonstrate to them something really important about that he is very strong and they can trust him.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think it's just really the people of Israel don't know God. Their ancestors knew him. They've been in Egypt for so long. None of them really know who God is. Like they go and so God has to really. None of them have seen anything like miraculous. Everyone's heard the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah and stuff like that, but no one was there. Mm-hmm. No one's seen anything like that from God for 200 years, 300 years. So I think this is really God like making a point and showing like reminding him who he is. So like just like y'all said, just like showing off kind of like what he is, how serious he is, who God is.
Who he really is, yeah.
Like,
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Because he said, I kind of feel like it's you heard about the old stories, now watch this. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah. Whatever he does, it needs to be in comparison to all those old stories. So it's got to be pretty good,
Yeah.
And
right?
if Moses just walks in and says, let us go, and Pharaoh says, okay. I mean, God could have done that simply.
Right.
But would they have appreciated it?
Right. They wouldn't have.
I don't think so. No, I don't think they would have at all.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, let's see. So Christy's having trouble like logging in and hearing and being heard. So she's going to log out and try to log back in.
Okay.
So when Pharaoh shall speak unto you, show a miracle for you, then you shall say unto Aaron, take thy rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and it shall become a serpent. So they went unto Pharaoh, and they did as the Lord commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod, and before his servants it became a serpent. So Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, now the Egyptians of Egypt, and they did in like manner with their enchantments. Every one of them cast down his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. See, I think that's pretty cool, because he did,
so great.
They were like, oh yeah, well, we can do that too. And he was like, yeah, but watch my staff eat yours, So
right.
I think that was a nice little touch. Hey, Christy, can you hear me at all? Oh, can you hear me? Boo. She's trying to get on. Aw, so sad. Oh, Logan, why? Logan just hit the button on my chair and made me sink. All right, so he hardened Pharaoh's heart. Then he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. And the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refused to let the people go. So get thee unto Pharaoh in the morning. He goeth out into the water, and thou shalt stand by the river's brink against he come, which the rod was turned into a serpent, shalt thou take in thy hand. And the rod, and the Lord God of the Hebrews hath sent to me, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. So I will smite with the rod that it is in my hand unto the waters which are the river, and they shall be turned to blood. And the fish that is in the river shall die, and the river shall stink, and the Egyptians shall loathe to drink water of the river. So that's disgusting. Can you imagine how nasty that is? Oh, it always makes me like dry heave, because I can just imagine how gross that is.
Yeah. Old blood is the worst stink there is.
Right? Ugh. Moses and Aaron did so as the Lord commanded, and he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river. And in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. Ugh. And the fish that was in the river died, and the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink the water of the river, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. So gross. And the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, neither did he hearken unto them. So he turned and he went into his house, neither did he set his heart to this also. And the Egyptians digged round about the river for water to drink, for they could not drink the water of the river. And 7 days were fulfilled. After that, the Lord had smitten the river. So what does that mean? Does that mean that the river turned back to water, or that it stayed blood? Maybe know
I
that.
think it stayed blood for 7 days, doesn't it?
That was my question. I didn't know if it would stay blood for 7 days, or if it, and then goes back to regular, because it says they dug around the river. I never noticed that part before.
Yeah.
So,
That's what, when you have bad water, you try to dig a hole and let it fill with water that's seeped through the sand and the dirt, because that kind of filters it out,
yeah.
And so they were trying to get water from that seeped out, but it turned to blood too. So they weren't being very successful with the.
Logan said to read it again. It says, and all the Egyptians digged round about the river for water to drink, for they could not drink of the water of the river. And 7 days were fulfilled. After that, the Lord had smitten the river. I know, I don't know. Yeah, because it just says the 7 days, so I don't know.
Yeah, and my verse 25 in the New King James says, and 7 days passed after the Lord had struck the river.
So does that mean that 7 days passed before they attempted it again, though? You know what I'm saying? Or does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know. It was certainly 7 days before the next plague.
Yeah. Because I guess in my mind, I kept it as it stayed. That's why I was asking.
Okay.
I mean, obviously it's not blood anymore, but in my mind, as the plagues build upon each other, it was always in my thoughts that it stayed blood. That's why I was wanting to know what that meant, because I've never noticed that verse before. All right, so
before we move on, can I ask a question?
Go up.
Why do you think now? I don't know. I haven't read anything about the history of Egypt in the sense of what their political system and how they worked and stuff was.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think Moses and Aaron, as people that were slaves, I mean, that Pharaoh considered his personal awful slaves, why do you think they could just walk right in there any day and talk to Pharaoh?
I don't know.
I think it's because Moses had an inside, being raised in the palace, Either that, or even the fact that because Moses was never a slave, so he was.
So they were honoring and recognizing him as royal family then?
See, I say no, because
but just the fact that he was even because they didn't know him, so even the fact that he was a stranger from a strange land coming in and wanting to talk to Pharaoh, and then he kind of proves himself with the signs, very first thing. He brought Aaron. I think just Moses having the in from before probably helped a lot. He probably knew the certain things to get in, or just requesting that audience with the king. Because I feel like that was a lot more common back then too. You read about Solomon later on, and people would just come to him and ask him stuff. Just come and ask the king stuff, just random people, because I guess the king was more of the final judgment, anyways. And so they could request that audience with the king.
Yeah,
I just
because
sort of have
I
a
don't
hard
think
time.
that they knew who he was. Uh-oh, Dad, you disappeared for a second there. What'd you say? Can you repeat that?
I said I just can't see that happening today, that you could walk just walk up to the president of the United States and saying, I'm going, do this, or I'm going to cause this plague to happen. I mean, how do you even get in? You can't even make an appointment. I mean,
Right.
I just, so times must have been different sometimes, but you're right, Logan. I mean, these kings were close with their people, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah,
They were a lot closer than our leaders are with us.
I don't think they had very many like judges, like they didn't have a system in place. They were just the authority. There wasn't much of a, which I mean, there was, because Joseph and them, they put people over the lands.
Yeah.
There's always the Pharaoh is like the king, or the Pharaoh, whoever is like the one that says yes or no. It's not really there's not really many people who have the authority to give like a solid answer.
Yeah.
Whereas now there's like in our society, there's 1,000 levels till you get to the president, So
I just can't see. I don't think though that they knew,
I don't think
that
they
it was
knew.
Joseph, because they specifically said that he waited until people died and didn't know
I don't think they knew him. I think it was probably more like he was in
the system.
just like a strange, because someone coming from a strange land, and someone coming back from a different country, requesting an audience with Pharaoh was more of a big deal. It wasn't like a slave coming and
Yeah.
asking.
And I mean, heck, he could have swooped in there all dramatic with his fancy flowing coat and been like, I have a message from God, the God. I mean, like, look, it's been a while since we've heard from God, but everybody knows him. You know what I mean? Like, because there is when, Joseph and his family came and Joseph saved Egypt. So maybe God does hold some standing, there in Egypt. People have heard of him. So for them to hear from him again after 400 years.
And he talked to the elders of the Jews, which are kind of like
the
leaders of the Jewish people. And even
that's true.
Even being slaves, I feel like there would still be some communication between the leaders of the Jewish people and then the leaders in Egypt. I feel like there'd be able to be some kind of communication there.
Maybe that's why he talked to the elders of the Jewish people first, because he had to go through the levels. Because they all believed him, when he showed him the signs. So who knows?
Well, there were 1 million of them, so it would be certainly hard to address everybody.
Yeah.
You got to get the word out somehow, and they didn't have TV or anything, so you couldn't just put it on Facebook.
Right. I would think though that when God speaks, because back then you had like little kids running door to door, like, oh my gosh, Henry at the market has 6 loaves of bread. You know what I mean? So if God is speaking again after all this time, I feel like that would be a big hairy deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I would think that all the little kids are running from door to door, like, he's talking to us again. You know what I mean? Like, it's time. And you know what I'm saying? Like, they've been crying out to him,
Yeah.
So I feel like, it would be a pretty big deal. And maybe even Pharaoh heard the stories of it coming, before it came to him. I don't know. Not sure.
Could be.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Good question though. All right. So the Lord spake unto Moses, go unto Pharaoh and say unto him, thus saith the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. And if they refuse, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs. Ew. And the rivers shall bring forth frogs abundantly. So in my mind, I know, what a weird plague.
I read a thing one time where the plagues were supposed to be representations and mocking Egyptian gods. It's been a long time since I read about it.
I've read something similar.
Where the plagues all had a purpose of mocking the the main Egyptian gods, and like the plagues and harvest, like frogs were supposed because the Egyptian god was represented as like a frog. There was fertility. I don't know. I can't remember. And then they struck the Nile because that was one of their big gods, and then locusts because of the harvest and stuff like that, where God was just like showing himself above all of their false gods. But it's been
That's
a really
interesting.
long time since I read about that.
I think I'm gonna have to look that up because I think that's really interesting. I've never heard that before. That's kind of interesting. I like that. Interesting.
I have another idea about the fair.
Go for it before we move on. Okay.
There also wasn't that many people who wanted to talk to Pharaoh or the kings. Because the king, if he didn't like you or didn't like the way you looked, he could just have you killed. So I don't think there was very many people that wanted to talk to him.
I mean, that's probably valid.
I think that's a pretty intimidating thing for anyone to want to talk to the Pharaoh.
That's true. It's pretty true.
Huh.
I don't know. That's all he's got. Okay. So we're gonna get some frogs now. Say unto Aaron, stretch forth thy hand. With thy rod over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause the frogs to come up in the land of Egypt. So, I mean, I'm gonna assume then I guess it has to be no more blood, for that to happen. And
Probably.
Aaron, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I always thought like, ew, bloody frogs everywhere. I truly, truly did. I watch a lot of TV though. Who knows? And the frogs shall come upon thee, and upon thy people, and upon thy servants. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying unto Aaron, stretch forth thy hand with thy. Oh, wait, I read that already. Sorry. Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments and brought up frogs upon the. So the
Double dose of frogs.
yeah, so they're matching it. Interesting. I didn't realize that.
They're matching him. There's miracle for miracle,
Yeah, but
Pharaoh's saying we can do this,
Well, then that's why it got so bad. What's your idea, Logan?
So he talks about God hardening Pharaoh's heart. But like I always struggle with it a lot because like the concept of free will and then God hardening Pharaoh's heart kind of negates free will.
Ooh, that's a good point.
And I've always thought about that. It's like how does free will exist if we always have to if it's God's plan, and how do we have free will? But I don't think God just changed Pharaoh's mind. I think God allowed the Egyptian magicians to be able to perform this stuff. So when Pharaoh sees that the Egyptians can do it, then he's not intimidated by God.
That's a good point. What do you think, Dad? I think that's a good point.
That probably is. And certainly the magicians being able to do it lent a lot of doubt to Pharaoh's mind that God was involved, because if his own magicians could do it, why should he be afraid of God? I mean, they're matching him. If Satan can do the same thing God can do, why fear or honor God more? And so and it's a good, I think a really good discussion to have sometime would be about what is free will. What does that mean? Because you have to define your terms and what is, what does it mean?
What were you going to say, Messina?
I just have a quick question, and I'm sorry that I was late to the game tonight.
You're fine.
What kind of time frame were these plagues happening? Were they every day? Were they every hour? Were they over an extended amount of time? Because you were talking about how you were thinking about bloody frogs everywhere, and it got me thinking about like the timeline of these.
Right.
And I don't have the Bible in front of me to look.
So we were just talking, you probably missed it because of logging in or whatever, but at the very end of chapter 7, it says that 7 days. It literally says, and 7 days were fulfilled. After that, the Lord had smitten the river. So we were talking about, does that mean if it goes back to normal, or does it, you know what I mean? So it probably went back to normal after 7 days, and then come the frogs after the flood. Yeah.
Okay. And as far as the free will stuff goes, I don't know, but that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I've never even put that into, that never even dawned on me. Like, but
I know that in services, Blaine has talked about like that word predestination in one of his teaching series. And it's kind of like, I 100% believe we have the free will to make the but if God hardened his heart, that's
yeah.
I think it's more like just God allowing things to happen. You know, because if God was opposed to the Egyptians doing it, then he's not gonna. Then he wouldn't let them do it. It's kind of like how witchcraft and stuff goes on like that today still, and there's demonic influences and things. But if God says stop, then it has to stop. You know, it doesn't have any power above God. It's what God allows to happen.
Yeah. I literally have never even dawned on my brain before. So I'm kind of like a little floored by that. And I feel like I feel like I need to think about that for a long time ago. Interesting.
I think that is a really good discussion about what free will is.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because I always thought free will was, which we can stop here and talk about it because we've got 10 minutes before the chat will end. But to me, free will has always been the right to choose. You know, that's what it means in my mind. It means in my mind the right to make the decision and choose to go left or right or up or down. So, I mean, basically, like just breaking it down in simple terms, that's what it's always meant to me. What does it mean to you, Logan? Free will.
Free will, it's always been, I've always thought about this. Just like, how do we have free will if God's plan is already determined? If God is outside of time, then how do we have a decision on what we're doing? So I think free will is just exactly what you said. It's we have the right to choose, and I've thought about it a lot. We have the right to choose, but God already knows, and He does everything He can to convince you and to tell you the truth. But it's still ultimately up to you to deal with it. It's always been up to you. Just because God knew from the beginning doesn't mean that it's changed. It's not up to you.
And in my mind, I've always figured God had a plan A, B, C, D, E, you know what I mean, down the line. Like, you know what I mean? He's God. He's infinite. He knows. So
it's why
I don't think there's any plan B with God. I think it's Becky's going to do this, or Logan's going to do this, or Messina's going to do this, but this is going to be done.
Yeah. I mean,
I thought that too, but then it's like God doesn't have a plan B because God
and I don't
already knew.
Yeah.
It was God's plan from the
He already
beginning.
knew.
He gives us the option. It's kind of like letting your kid pretend like they're helping. It's not.
I mean, that's a really good comparison. That is like a very, very good comparison. Huh.
Yeah.
It's true. We all do it because we do it like we do. We pretend they're helping. Like, oh, here's your rolling pin and your wad of dough while I make this pie. Now make your own special pie, but I'll make the real pie. It's so true.
Obviously, like
here's her little dust brush while I have the cleaning solution.
Yeah.
and like obviously it gets a lot more serious with people in like when you come down to salvation and things like that, but it's still like God says, all right, you can do this, but it's gonna happen no matter what. But you can do it if you want to do it.
If you could do the easy way or the hard way, but we're gonna do it.
Are we going to ask the question about the time difference? Like we're talking in Egypt with Moses and the plagues and things. That was before Christ.
Yeah.
God would straighten you down with lightning if he felt like it.
Oh.
You know, now we have Jesus. Or that could play a difference in the free will too.
Good. I mean, does it specifically say in there that we have free will? Or is that just something we'd assume? Where in the Bible does
That is a great question.
have free will? Or is this something we assume? Because I've never honestly, I don't think I remember a single Bible verse that says you have free will. I'm gonna Google it. Watch me Google it.
Google.
Go ahead and Google.
I mean, in some aspects, I doubt there is, because it's just the scriptures that are randomly popping in my brain right now. It's, you know, there's only one way to get to heaven. There's only one route to salvation. You know, it's all very mapped out.
But it also talks about people going against what God wants. So is it God? The fact that you can go against what God wants, say like Matthew 23:37, it says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that kill the prophets and stones those which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as hens gather her chickens under wings, and ye would not." So God wanted to do it, but they wouldn't. And so obviously there's obviously some sway between what God wants and what you can do.
And
What'd you find, Becky?
so the verse that Logan just read, and then in Revelation 22:17, it says, "And the Spirit and the bride say, Come, and let him that heareth say, Come, and let him that is athirst come, and whoever will, let him take the water of life freely." So salvation is free. That's what that verse means to me, is let him take the water of life freely. Tells me that the water of life, that's salvation, that's Jesus. But that doesn't.
But it doesn't tell you that it's your will is free. And if you look at that, there's only one verse in the Bible that comes close to declaring free, to saying free will. And that's in the New American Standard, and it's not in the King James. But in the New American Standard, in the book of Philemon, Paul says he wants Philemon to take back Onesimus and to set him free of his own free will, not out of obligation to Paul. And that's in jest, actually. I mean, it's like, you know, you owe me your life, Onesimus, but if you want to keep this guy as a slave rather than doing what I ask you to do, you know, you can make a free will decision about that. That's the only place
That's
really
very
where that comes up.
That is
Now, if you're a Calvinist from the Presbyterians and from John Calvin, they are predestination people. That there is, you know, that you're elect, you know, God picks who's going to heaven and picks who's going to hell, and you have no choice in the matter.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. And that's Calvinistic theology. That's Congregational Church, Reformed Church, Presbyterian Church, and so forth. Now they've all modified things in America, because that's just that's anathema in America to suggest you can't make your own decisions about
I
stuff.
feel like everyone needs to write a book report on this, because have you ever even thought of that though, Messina? I have never
Well, you see,
given it this much thought.
going through,
I have.
I just looked up verses about free will. When you go through, starting from Genesis, it says, "You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but the tree of knowledge and good of evil you shall not eat. For in that day you eat of it, then you shall surely die." God tells them not to eat it, and then they eat it anyways.
But that
And then
doesn't
it
mean they have
says,
free
"Let
will.
no man say he is tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desires, when it's conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin from growing brings death." So people are going after their own desires, not the desires of God. Because it's best for man.
Yeah, but
Same.
that doesn't mean that it's not already, because if God already knows,
Well, that's the thing.
You know what I'm
God
saying?
knows, but that's not what he wants. God's will is for everyone to be saved. God's will is for people to come to Christ and to accept it and serve him. But there's that separation people have chosen.
yeah.
And it says too, like,
I'm
Right.
spitballing here.
you go